The following is an independently produced community access program. The viewpoints expressed are those of the community access producer and do not reflect those of Shaw Cable Systems. The program is presented in response to CRTC policy guidelines regulating community programming.
Welcome to the Kerby Centre Successful Aging Series. We really appreciate you being with us right now. Today I'm joined with Charlene, please say your name again. Reslav, who is the social worker with the Family Caregiver Centre in Alberta Health Services, and also Deb Runnels. She's our senior manager at the Kerby Centre for Wellness and Support Services. I'm Luanne Whitmarsh, and I'm the CEO of the Kerby Centre. Today we're going to be talking about caregiving. Thanks. So welcome.
Thank you.
So talk to us a little bit about who are the family caregivers.
Our definition of a family caregiver is a very broad definition. It is basically anyone who is caring for someone and not getting paid for it. So that might mean a family member in whatever realm. It could be a friend, a neighbor. A family caregiver is anyone who just cares.
I think, Deb, you probably come across a lot of these situations in your work at the Kerby Centre.
Certainly in our adult day program, we come across a number of caregivers. The purpose of our program is to ensure that that caregiver relationship is preserved and that caregivers get a break so that they can continue doing what they do.
Is caregiving primarily spouses, or is it children, older children? Like, what is sort of the example you have?
There's a really broad range. A caregiver, I would say the bulk of the caregivers that I meet on a regular basis are either adult children or spouses. That would be the majority by far.
Oh, that's excellent. Thanks, that's so interesting. And so what should we get to hear from you so that we watch to know what a family member needs to be aware of?
What a family caregiver needs to be aware of is, first and foremost, that the person that they're caring for is absolutely still a person, even though they require some support. So it's really important to communicate with the person who's receiving care, to have that respect and that open dialogue about the care needs for the caregiver. I don't think I can express that clearly enough. That it's really important for the family caregivers to have those conversations on a regular basis.
Would there be anything that you would add there, Deb?
I think it's important to assess what kind of caregiving is needed. It's critical that you look at what is the need of the individual that's being cared for, and ensuring that the right kind of care is brought in. That way, making sure that the caregiver is also supported by the other people that are in the home if that's necessary.
Absolutely.
I think that's so important, isn't it? Because that's what sustains that arrangement for extra point of time, so that the unit stays together.
Absolutely.
Wow, that's great. So if a parent or parents require care, what is the best way to approach it as a family so they haven't recognized that themselves? Maybe you could start.
So first of all, I go back to that need to maintain respect and dignity. Even though the person who is requiring care may be struggling, they still need to be respected and heard. So having those conversations with family members and everyone who's really connected. So I really like the idea of family meetings where everyone who's concerned about the situation comes together with the person who's requiring care. You can do that face-to-face if everyone's in the same city. Sometimes family members are a distance away, and so bring them in on Skype. At the very least, keep them informed through email, those kinds of things. So making sure that everybody that's really connected to the situation becomes a really big part of that conversation.
This is hard stuff, though. These are hard conversations to have.
They really are. So having a plan before you get started, what is it that's your concern? What specific things? So not just saying, Mom, I'm worried about you, but maybe saying, you know, Mom, last time I came, the stove was left on. I noticed when you're walking, I'm really worried that you're going to fall because you kind of, you know, look like you're going to trip. And be very specific about the concerns, because just open-ended kind of "I'm worried about you" doesn't usually speak to the specifics.
I would think that you've come across this with the folks that you work with. It's a really, really emotional time. How do you prepare the team to have these conversations as families are preparing to have these difficult conversations?
I think the most important thing is that each person has to come to their own understanding of truly what is caregiving, what do they understand it to mean, and then really getting to know the family. What do they understand the words caregiving to mean? And it's critical to really ask the hard questions beforehand. The more support a caregiver has before they go into family meetings, the better. It's a lonely, isolating place to go otherwise. Once you're into caregiving, you're so busy providing and loving that a lot of those other opportunities are gone forever. So it's really about the conversations that you can have beforehand, bringing the resources in and the supports that are in the community and there for you, so that you've got a plan in place that builds around you what you need to be able to do this well.
Absolutely.
Is there help out there for families that are needing to prepare for these tough conversations?
There is, absolutely. Certainly with the Family Caregiver Centre, we have the availability of having those one-on-one conversations to just kind of walk through the possibilities of options. And like you said, every family is different, and every family set of family dynamics is very unique. So it's really important to remember that it's not a cookie cutter kind of situation, that every family needs to look at it from their own history, their own relationships, and it is very important, like you said, to prepare ahead of time, have those thoughts, make lists. I often advocate for making lists of what are your concerns, what are the options available, and sometimes you can do that in the family meeting. Sometimes it's a good idea as well to have those conversations ahead of time.
I would think that having the conversations ahead of time prepares the kids, the adult kids, for dealing with if there's issues within the family that we don't agree. So if I don't agree with my sibling about the action plan they're proposing, then that doesn't get into the bigger family difficulties, and it stays between us so we can work that through. And would that be something that you would recommend, Deb?
Absolutely. I think it's critical that at the beginning you do as much work as you can, because you're actually coming into the situation almost always at the best it's going to be. It's going to get worse from here as somebody's health declines, as their memory declines and capacity declines. So this is the time now to do the planning, because it's not what it's going to be in the end. That's not what it is today. What it is today is the beginning of a new journey together, and the more prepared you can be, the better that will go for everyone.
I've also heard people say that there's a tremendous sense of guilt that comes along with these conversations. And the guilt I speak of right now is the guilt from the older children that are feeling, I know this needs to happen for my parents. I can't do it. I'm overextended in my personal life. My kids aren't grown yet. I'm still a working person. And then there's that sense of real guilt that comes along with that. And how would you explain that?
Guilt is I always look at guilt as something that we have, a feeling that we have when we've done something wrong. In the case of caregiving, we should not be feeling guilt because we have not done something wrong. We're in a situation that's really difficult, and it's not the situation we would wish on anyone. So I like to look at it as a sense of regret as opposed to a sense of guilt. Regret is simply wishing that things were different, whereas guilt is I did something wrong. And most of the time with family caregiving, the caregiver has not done something wrong. They wish that their mom or their dad or their spouse was not ill. They wish they didn't have to look at those difficult decisions, but they haven't done anything wrong, and I think that that's a really key thing to pay attention to.
Does that fit for you when you're thinking about supporting people through this tough time?
Absolutely. I think one of the things that's not talked about because you're getting so busy into the planning stages is grief and loss, and even the trauma that this is bringing into a family. You know you're going into a final journey with someone you love. If you're an adult child, this isn't the way it's written in all the books. It's not supposed to happen this way. And so as you get busy caring for someone, you're also learning to let go of them, and it's very difficult. How do you find the time to look after yourself and care for yourself when your life has become about caring for someone else?
You know, that's really interesting, because it brings up the point that if the adult children or the spouse say, I'm going to do all this long list of things, and then they just find themselves exhausted, and then they become angry, and then they become so angry with themselves, that is so counterproductive to what we're trying to accomplish. When we're caring for our loved ones, it's the best situation for them at the time, and it might not be that you have to be the primary caregiver. It might be to preserve your own health and your own well-being that you need to make decisions based on, with that into the whole mix of things. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And you know, when we talk about our children, we talk about it takes a village to raise a child, and the same really goes for those caregiving situations. It really does take a village to care for our family members when they are not well. No one person can do it all.
Would you add anything to that, Deb?
I think that that's where the resources in the community and community coming together are so important. In the Adult Day program at the Kerby Centre, for example, family members can have somebody come in 1 or 2 days a week. And so that's a couple of days a week where you're not a caregiver, where you're a husband, you're a wife. You can do some of those things and nurture your own soul, so that when you are caregiving, you're doing your best, and that's the best opportunity to be able to avoid that guilt and that regret.
You know, it's always interesting because we're all aging. The moment we're born, we begin the aging process. And the successful aging means that you're surrounded by those who are doing the best for you and themselves. And I think that those things are really, really important when we're looking at how do we, as a sector, as a senior sector, look at supporting those and making sure that we're helping them come to a realization of what is real. And I think those things are really, really important. So we're going to take a break at this moment, and we're going to come back with Charlene and Deb, and we're going to talk some more. The Kerby Centre website is www.kerbycentre.com. Also, we're on Facebook and Twitter. Join us. You'll learn a lot. Welcome back to the Kerby Centre Successful Aging Series. I'm Luanne, and I'm here still with Charlene and with Deb. Welcome back. Our topic right now is caregiving, and earlier we talked about the person who is looking for services, but right now we'd like to talk about the caregiver. So I come back to you guys to look at, as experts in the field, how do we pay attention to those who are giving the care? So we mentioned earlier that it could be the adult children, it could be a spouse. How do we look after those folks?
First of all, I think we need to recognize the role that the caregiver is taking. Often it's at great expense to them personally. It's for an adult child, for example, who's providing care. They may have stepped back from their work. They may be sacrificing time at home with their families, those kinds of things. So the first thing is to really recognize the decision they've made to provide care for the loved one. And the second thing that's really important is to encourage them to take care of themselves at some level. Now, when somebody's providing care for a family member, it seems very difficult often to find time to care for themselves. So I like to think about taking advantage of the moment. So I often like to think about things like taking a mini vacation. And often people think of a mini vacation as maybe 2 or 3 days away. When I'm thinking of a mini vacation, I'm thinking of 2 or 3 minutes of time spent to yourself. So how do we do that? Some family caregivers have set up their living room in such a way that they have a chair that faces a wall, so they can sit down there and read for a few minutes or just regroup. Other people find things like deep breathing exercises, even spending a few extra minutes in the washroom when you have to go. So finding those moments, those very brief moments to just regroup and be ready to go out and continue what you're doing is so very important.
Deb, would you add to that?
I think that we really need to understand this is powerful work. This is some of the hardest work that some of these families will ever do. Absolutely. In saying we're going to take this difficult, painful, sad journey together. And so when you're doing that, you've already opened the door to conversations that many families don't have around how do we talk about death and dying? How do we talk about goodbyes? Because what these families have committed to is to saying, you're not going to go into care, you're going to age at home, and we're going to provide that care, and we're going to be a family as long as we can. And so when you look at the heart and soul of what drives this, it's so powerful. And I think the most critical things to remember are that only if we recognize that work being done and the heart and soul of it, will we know how to nurture it well.
I've heard it, sorry, I was just going to say, I've heard from some folks that have talked with me at the Kerby Centre that they had to train themselves as the caregiver to nap when the person was napping, when the person they were caregiving was napping, and to let go of some things that are no longer important, because the love and the care is important, and the dust bunnies, they're just going to have to hang in there. And so they've said that they had to really kind of check in with themselves at a deep level to say, what is the core values here, and what is just things that I can let go. And I think that's sort of the message that I'm hearing from both of you guys.
I think it's also really important while we're having those difficult conversations to also remember to just be a couple, to just be a family. Take those moments to do those things that you love to do. So finding humor in your everyday life, taking time to enjoy one another is so very critical, because we often get so caught up in the do list that we don't remember to be and to enjoy. And it's so very important to just really take those moments to enjoy, even if they're momentary.
So let's talk about some of the resources, because what is absolutely phenomenal in Calgary especially is there are lots of resources out there. If people step outside of their own self, they can get a lot of resources. And can you talk a little bit, Charlene, about some of those resources you know?
Yes, resources come in a lot of ways. So one of the first places we look for resources is, if we need some physical help, for example, is to look at Alberta Health Services has home care. Home care can do a wide variety of things in terms of physical support in the home for the person receiving care. You can contact home care at 403-943-1600. They will come in and do an assessment for you. Other places that you can find resources, you can hire through an agency. There are lots of agencies that will hire out in the city. You can also hire privately. Now, it's very important to remember, if you choose to hire someone privately, that you need to be very careful that you've done your due diligence, you've made sure that the person that you're bringing into your family home is safe and secure. So that's really important. You can also look at volunteers. Sometimes you can find volunteers in your faith communities, in your community centers, other family members that can come in. So help and support can come in a very wide variety of places.
Excellent. You know some other resources?
Well, I think that we look broad for resources. We've got many caregivers who are trying to provide care, and yet they're not even close to the family or home as far as location goes. And so accessing those community resources and being aware that there are so many places that you can go, and making sure that you don't just gather resources for the family member you're caring for, but for yourself. So some of the different ones, massages and spa days, and you can do them together, but just making sure that that self-care is woven into caring for the person that you're there for.
I see you have the Seniors Directory. Want to talk about that?
I do. This is the Seniors Directory. Where do I want to hold it up?
There.
The Seniors Directory is put out by Kerby Centre every year, and I use it as a great resource. It has a list of pretty much every resource that's available in the city in terms of both social things, physical help, so if you need help with housekeeping, those kinds of things, as well as the personal care stuff, and everything in between I can't even begin to list. So this is a great resource that is available at free newsstands anywhere in the city, so we can all pick those up.
Excellent, excellent. What about when the relationship changes? Let's talk a little bit about that. So you're in a spousal relationship and you're the caregiver of your loved one. Let's talk a little bit about how hard that must be.
It is really difficult. Not being in a caregiving situation, I can't actually even really truly picture what it's like, because first of all, every relationship is different, every situation is different, but I think regardless of what our relationship is with our spouse, it's really important to maintain that relationship. So not only spending all our time in caregiving, but remembering to be a couple, remembering to have conversations about the care needs, but also remembering to have conversations about life, about the grandchildren, about the weather, whatever it is. Remember to live, even though you're in a very busy time of your life.
You know, Charlene, we've and Deb, really, we've talked a lot about, I guess, the challenges and the tougher side of caregiving. I'd love to hear now about some of the successes and some of the feelings that people have had that have kind of brought us into a more positive end of things. Do you have some feedback for that?
Absolutely. You know, as challenging a journey as it is, caregivers choose to be caregivers, first of all, out of commitment, but mostly out of love. And when we love somebody, it's always a worthwhile journey. I have had many caregivers come to me after that part of their journey has ended and said, I am so thankful that I had the opportunity to walk with Mom. I learned things about my mom or my dad that I would have never known if I hadn't had that opportunity to walk that journey.
Wonderful?
And it just warms my heart, and it makes me realize that it really is worthwhile to walk that journey with someone you care about.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And Deb, do you have some stories that you can share with us?
Well, we certainly, in our adult day program at the Kerby Centre, have been able to see a number of times where families have come together in a powerful way. There's a lot of hard conversations that have built up over life, and so it's a real time of forgiveness. And so we've actually been able to be part of some families reuniting in a way that they hadn't been able to do when they were all busy with their lives. And certainly we had one woman in our program who eventually had to move on to a dementia adult day program as opposed to a holistic one. And she told her daughter she needed to come back to our adult day program and just spend some time with the team there and with her daughter, because it had become such a family connection as a whole. And so it certainly builds a strong group. The group that we have, when they come together, it's just like a family reuniting, and it's really amazing how they journey with each other. We had an event a few months ago where they had to draw what they saw when they looked at each other, and some of those pictures of each of our clients, what they saw in the other ones, it was transforming. So it's days filled with a lot of hard conversations and a lot of miracles.
I think that those are the kinds of stories that give people hope and bring people to the realization it will be hard. It will be gut-wrenching some days. It will be really hard stuff to work through. Worth it. Positive, absolutely. Energizing, forgiving, and thankful. What would you add to that? And jump in, Deb, if you wish.
I think from what we've seen over the years is that it's a time for families to reunite. There's a lot of forgiveness, there's a lot of forgotten. The things that mattered once no longer matter. And so it really is about families uniting and coming together and really remembering how much they loved each other.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And can you just tell us one more time a little bit about your role in the center?
Absolutely. My role at the Family Caregiver Centre is to support family caregivers through guiding people to resources, listening to your story, connecting you with things like support groups. We have speaker events which family caregivers can come and join with other family caregivers and learn about different aspects of caregiving. We have a number of support groups and things like that. So do feel free to give me a call at 403-955-1674 if you would like to chat if you're a caregiver right now.
That is just fantastic. I thank you both for coming in and talking today, because to be successful in aging means that you have to have people around you who support you. And so thank you for being here this evening.
Thank you.
So this comes to a conclusion for this segment of the Successful Aging from the Kerby Centre. Thank you very much for being here with us again today. KerbyCentre.com is our website. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter. And I'm Luanne Whitmarsh, and I really thank you for spending some time with us again today.